Chapter 12 of Eternal Security, entitled, What Do We Have to Lose? Anyone who thinks that a believer's sins carry no eternal consequences has overlooked a major area of biblical theology. Yet I frequently encounter believers who think just that. Somewhere along the way, they were taught or just assumed that heaven will be the same for everybody. As long as they are in, that is the only thing that matters. Eternal security becomes nothing more than a safety net, an emergency precaution. This attitude leads to the abuses of eternal security that have driven many away from the idea altogether, and understandably so. If heaven is going to be the same for everyone, I can understand their point. We can have the best of both worlds. Granted, Christ's sacrifice ought to motivate us to follow Him in obedience. But if there are no long-term consequences for not following Him, why not partake from time to time of the pleasures of sin? What do we have to lose? The next section is subtitled, Real Christians Don't Sin. Many persons who hold to eternal security respond to this dilemma by doubting the genuineness of the person's salvation, who would even consider such a response to God's grace. In other words, a real Christian will obey Christ. Anyone who would use God's grace as an excuse to sin is not really a Christian at all. I have heard countless sermons in which some well-meaning pastor or evangelist assured his audience that if they were participating in certain sins, their salvation was not genuine. If you have heard such preaching, you know what generally happens. At the end of the service, the altar rail is filled, not with unbelievers, however, but with Christians whose assurance has been stripped away. This view is simplistic, however, and skirts the real issue. If taking negative advantage of God's grace was proof that a person was not really a believer, we would all be in trouble. For example, each time we break the speed limit, we take unfair advantage of God's grace. Romans 13:1. Furthermore, the New Testament is full of exhortations against sin. In every case, these are addressed to believers. If real Christians don't or can't abuse God's grace by getting involved with sin, why warn them against it? Obviously, the New Testament writers realize that Christians are as capable of sinning as most lost men. The next section is subtitled, A Question of Motivation. So then, have we found a theological loophole? Apart from appreciation for all God has done, is there any reason to be good? Do we have anything to lose by sinning? Is there anything to gain by staying pure? The answers to these questions become evident when a person understands the Bible's teachings on man's ultimate destiny. In most cases, individuals who are genuinely disturbed by these questions have been misinformed about two things. One, where Christians will spend eternity, and two, what it will be like. Subtitle, Our Final Home. Most Christians believe their ultimate destiny is heaven. That is not true. Man's ultimate destiny is planet Earth. When God created the heavens and the earth, He intentionally placed man on the earth. He could have put him in heaven, but God placed man here for a specific purpose, to rule over creation. Genesis 1:28-31. The earth became man's responsibility. To make his job easier, God designed a body for man that is tailor-made for living and working on planet Earth. That was God's plan in the beginning, and nowhere in Scripture are we informed that His original plan has been altered. On the contrary, all of Scripture teaches that we are moving toward a time in which God's original plan will be fulfilled. Subtitle, Our Temporary Home. When sin entered the world, death was close behind. Romans 5:12. Death was not a part of God's original plan for mankind. and eventually it will be done away with completely. 1 Corinthians 15:26. In the meantime, however, death is a present reality. When a believer dies, he or she goes immediately to be with the Lord. 2 Corinthians 5:6-8. Since we know from numerous passages that Christ is seated at the right hand of God in heaven, it is safe to say that Christians go to heaven when they die. Colossians 3:1. Paul confirms this idea in his first letter to the Christians in Thessalonica. 1 Thessalonians 4:14-17. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep in Jesus. For this we say to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord shall not precede those who have fallen asleep. Then we who are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and thus we shall always be with the Lord. When Jesus returns for the Christians who are still alive on the earth, Paul says he will bring with him those Christians who died earlier. This comment can mean only one thing. When Christians die, they go to heaven immediately. But Christians do not stay in heaven forever. When Christ returns, he will establish a kingdom on this earth, a kingdom that will last for 1,000 years. See Revelation 20, verse 4. If, as Paul said, we shall always be with the Lord, when he returns, it makes sense that we will be included in this kingdom. Keep in mind, this is an earthly kingdom, Revelation 20, 7 and 8. So once again, believers will make their home on earth. When the 1,000 years are completed and Satan has been defeated, once and for all, God will recreate the earth. Revelation 21, verses 1-3. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth passed away, and there was no longer any sea. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, made ready as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is among men, and he shall dwell among them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be among them. God will not only recreate the earth, he is planning to move in. Instead of men dying and going to heaven, John presents us with the picture of God packing up and coming to earth. The point is, after Christ's return, man is back on earth forever. Sin and death will be destroyed, thus erasing any potential division between man and his Creator. All in all, God's original plan will be fulfilled. Think again, what does all of this have to do with eternal security? A great deal. First of all, it answers the questions of where believers will be eternally secure. Second, it throws a theological wrench into the notion that as long as we get to heaven, that is all that matters. That is not all that matters, because heaven is just a stopover. Heaven is temporary. We are all coming back one way or another. Eternity is not a huge white room where we will all wander around looking for interesting historical figures to chat with. It is not going to be one long church service. Neither will it be one continual game of golf or softball or whatever else you enjoy doing. We will not be wearing white robes and walking around on clouds. It is not many of the things we have imagined for we who are believers will spend eternity on earth. So the question remains, what will it be like when God establishes his rule on earth? What will we do? And most important, will what we do then have anything to do with what we are doing now? Think about it. If God puts a condition on his faithfulness to us, do we not also have a right to put a condition on ours? Can God really expect more of us than he does of himself? Let me just make a personal note here. I'm kind of as surprised as you are that Charles Stanley is saying that we will be on earth forever. I understand the 1,000 year reign, and I agree with that, but I'm kind of shocked, to be honest with you, about the one that's staying on earth forever. But anyway, we'll continue next week, chapter 13, entitled Every Second Counts.